Welcome to Season 3.
And this tradition unlike any other.
Welcome, ladies and gents, back to episode 2 of season 3 of the Business Culture Podcast. Awesome as always to have you with us, and we've got a fascinating guest lined up for this episode, none other than Alison Boruchowitz, currently the head of organisation and people at Puma South Africa, previously also of Cape Union Mart, amongst other positions. Just a wonderful insight into what it means to build a culture within an organisation, specifically focusing on learning and development. And we just shared some really interesting insights about what's working at the moment in that space and what is making impacts when it comes to people and what is important to people at the moment in terms of pushing them in the right direction, I think mentally, emotionally, and just in terms of their specific skill sets. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
It's interesting how when you meet someone for the first time, you get a certain feeling about them. And I know we had a very brief meeting when you were still back at Cape Union Mart. And for those who haven't met you, haven't had the pleasure of spending time with you, we always like to start the discussion or the conversation just giving a bit of context around what your journey has been like up until now. We always call it a little bit of an executive summary, if you will, but just giving us a kind of a summary view of what your career has entailed up until now.
So I always say, for my sins, I sort of fell into HR. I've always been in the retail environment, and as a student, I started working with EdCon many years ago, and from there, just my degree as well was a Bachelor of Commerce with Industrial Psych and Business Management, and the sense was that HR looked like a really great role to go into. So I spent a good few years with EdCon, and that's really where I would say I fell in love with both HR and with retail. And then being quite young, I wanted to move a little bit faster than EdCon was able to help me, unless I wanted to move cities, which I didn't want to do at that stage. And then I joined Cape Union Mart when it was still a 16-store operation. And that was an amazing experience. I was with them for a very long time. I grew and matured with the business. And when I left, the company had more than 100 stores. Of course, Again, tongue-in-cheek, I'd love to think that it was all me, and that's how the business grew. But of course, I know that that's not the case at all. It was an amazing team effort, and also a business with a fantastic culture. And yes, that's where we met and our paths crossed. Then I did about a 3 to 4 year stint with a consulting company called Omni HR Consulting, which quite a few people would know about. They do awesome learning and development interventions and dealt more on the HR side. But I think wonderful business to be in, great to sort of try consulting. But ultimately, my love was for retail, and that's how I ended up back with Puma. So it's been a good 20 years. I'm giving away my age. It's been a good 20 years. And are there days where there are major frustrations? Yes. But there are more days where I love it than when I don't. And then just tie it all together, after I'd studied, I then went back and did an MBA, which was just great from giving me an all-round perspective. I've always believed, specifically within HR and the environment I'm in, we call it people and organization, it's critical that you understand the whole business to really do justice to your role within human resources.
It's interesting you end off with that, because one thing that's struck me about you as an individual, not that I've spent a lot of time around you, but something that's still, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you strike me as the kind of person who is a continual learner. I think someone who is always trying to develop a new degree of understanding on a certain subject, whatever that subject might be. Would that be an accurate way to describe you as a person in the working space?
Yeah, very accurate. And I was actually discussing this with someone yesterday evening, that I wasn't an overachiever at school. I did what I needed to do, but after I left school and I would say I found my niche, I constantly am wanting to learn more. And I think COVID was a great opportunity. Lockdown was a great opportunity. I did a short course through Get Smart, and I've done a few other courses. And it's that continual learning, and it doesn't even have to be formal. It can be informal learning, and you can be amazed by the things you learn just by having conversations with others. So I'm super passionate about learning and development, whatever that learning and development might mean for you. But just, constantly chase that, constantly have a love to learn more.
I'm also curious then to know, is that something which you think kind of inherently developed over time? Is it something that you think was always going to be part of your evolution as a person? Or do you think that something happened where you mentioned that at school you weren't necessarily that into academia as such, but perhaps that yearning to learn more developed over time? Do you think that was just the natural course of your development, or was there something that happened that made that more prolific?
I think it's a bit of a yes/no answer. So I've always wanted to know. I don't know if it's just typically I've always been very inquisitive about. I want to understand things, and I don't want to miss out on anything. There could be a bit of a character flaw, but I don't like to miss out on things. But I believe once I was in an environment I was interested to understand how things worked. So I didn't just want to take things at face value or go, okay, that's fine. I really wanted to understand it better. And the more you learn, the more you realize how little you actually know. And I think that's what happened. I want to understand. I seek to understand. And the more I know about an individual or about an area, the better I'm able to understand. And do I get it wrong? Absolutely. I mean, I still get it wrong. I got something wrong the other day where I probably didn't clarify enough. And I've now realized I need to find out a little bit more about something, which will require a little bit of additional learning. So that's why it's a bit of a yes/no answer.
Okay.
Yes, but I've always been interested. But no, in that it only really, once the bug bites and you're interested in something, then all the parents out there, we worry about our children until they find something they're really interested in. And then naturally you want to know more.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know if it links into something which I've learned in the space, which is the power of contextual learning. And that you mentioned that once you got into a space that perhaps caught your interest or something that made a bit more sense in terms of the context, that you wanted to get deep into what that meant and how to do it better. Do you find that in your experience over time in this industry that contextual learning for teams, for people that are forming part of a company, is that an effective avenue to really kind of get or create better understanding amongst the many individuals that you've had the pleasure of spending time with? Yes,
I'd say definitely. Again, if you even take it back to school, for a lot of people, they don't understand, why do I have to study life sciences or geography or history? What does it mean to me? Whereas when you're in the work environment, you can practically implement something. Or these are additional tools that will help and assist you. And when somebody's studying or learning or reading something and they have an aha moment where they go, oh, wow, this can really help me, or this can help me with a situation. So I'm all about being quite practical. So whilst I love the theory of study, I love even more the fact that you can take something and say, well, fine, how can we actually use it? How can we put it into practice? How can it be operationally viable for us? And whatever that learning might be.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that. I find that much like you in the school environments in academia, I struggle to understand the relevance of certain subjects or certain subject matter, and I think bridging that gap between the theoretical space and the practical application, which I suppose in retail is so critical. Especially with the fact that you're engaging with customers, you're not just using product knowledge, for example, in a theoretical capacity, but you're actually needing to convey it and connect with the personality and all these different skill sets. It's it's so key that you have a contextual understanding of how it fits into their lives. Would you agree with that in terms of, I guess, how you take the theory and put it into the practical space?
Completely. Again, and this is also where practicing what you've been taught. So you can be given or read something, and if you aren't able to link it back to what a lot of times is happening now is blended learning. So you do some classroom learning, you do some online, and then you do something called work integrated learning, which takes you back to the workplace and go, okay, well, this is what we learned in the classroom. Oh, fantastic. This is now how I integrate it into the workplace. Or I need to do a project, and it related to a customer complaint or overcoming an objection. Oh, wow, I was able to do that with the customer. I was able to see how they
I remember back at Cape Union Mart. Sorry, Alison, I just struck a chord there, but I remember back at Cape Union Mart, you guys were very good with that work integrated element of the learning, where it was critical that there was a clear bridge between whatever had been done in the classroom to how it was going to translate onto the shop floor, as it were.
Yes, and very much so. So within Puma as well, there's a lot of learning that takes place, and it's critical. A lot of early morning learning in the retail stores, and at a head office, a lot more. Well, since COVID, a lot more e-learning. But again, with the e-learning from a head office point of view, what is critical? What is key? What is a hot topic at the moment? And we take short snippets. We do a lot of LinkedIn learning, things that people can again apply. Let's not be under any illusion that not everybody wants to do learning and development. And if you aren't able to entice them with something that's interesting and can benefit them, then a lot of the times you're dead in the water. So for me, it's a big thing to try to just mix it up a little, do some things that aren't always the most interesting, but then other things that are super interesting. And hopefully you strike a really good balance. We need to be realistic as well in terms of our expectations of learning. Some people love it and others don't. So if I can try to get the majority to learn something, then my job is largely done.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's tough to always get full buy-in and 100% conversion rates, but it's finding that balance, like you said. I'm curious to know from your perspective, when you start talking about the nature of how learning has changed, and I think it has changed substantially, even with COVID and the need for an increased amount of e-learning. There's also been this trend around sort of rapid or micro learning as well, which has not always been the case. If I go again back to the days of school, and perhaps you and I were in that phase, it was a lot about textbook, quite sort of substantial amount of content, and then an assessment or an exam much later on. Whereas today, the sort of ratio between content and some form of an assessment or give back is quite a lot more, repeated, if I can put it that way. There's a lot more sort of incremental learning happening. Do you find that's being effective for you, or do you find that has been a trend that you've got on board with, or not so much?
Sure, really good question. To be quite honest, I haven't given that too much thought, but yes, I think again the pace of change and how something's relevant today and it's not relevant tomorrow. And COVID has been, it's just been the biggest learning for so many of us. We all thought that things could only happen in one way, and all of a sudden, people were Zooming and Teamsing, and Skype was out the window, and so much has changed. We would never in the past have potentially thought of doing a podcast or not doing something face to face. Good heavens, you didn't do that. Whereas now it's acceptable, and I think that's where, if I take that back to learning, sort of the bit learning, doing small parts of learning, again, being able to take that back to the workplace, then changing things up a little bit, and the next time you do some learning, something's already changed, or there's additional information to it. I think that's hugely beneficial. The days of doing a course for one full week on management skills, just for want of a better example, it changes. You sit there and you have experiences from other people, and all of a sudden the learning takes on a completely different feel, and because you've got input from different people. So I think the shorter, there's definitely place for longer learning. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love to ultimately one day do a doctorate, and that's a very different kind of learning. But I think there's place for both. But in the workplace, wanting to be functional, wanting to be quick, wanting to collaborate with people, the shorter type of learning for me, I think is hugely is a huge advantage. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, absolutely, so well. It actually struck a light bulb with me in the sense that I think you mentioned earlier about, different people having different propensity towards learning, etc. But, I think that the reality of the fact is that people have different bandwidths when it comes to learning, and one's got to be cognizant of that, especially when we're talking about those superstars at the coalface of the experience. There's a lot of stuff going on for them, and the learning has got to kind of fit into their lives rather than try and sit on the side as a side project. It's got to be integrated, as we've been saying. So sometimes that incremental learning is effective, and sometimes maybe there's opportunity for longer, but got to be mindful of, I guess, who's listening. I wanted to kind of pick your brain also on this very popular notion at the moment of being, I suppose, purpose-led. And there's a lot of, I guess, Simon Sinek's kind of influence here with starting with why. And I think most of us that are in this field probably latched onto that to some extent. I wanted to ask you, in terms of your journey so far, if you take the evolution of learning and development, and I guess this is two questions in one, but has there been a time in the career where there's been a bit of a light bulb moment like that, where things have quite dramatically changed in terms of, we typically always focused on the what and the how, and now all of a sudden it's the why that is the point of origin. Was it like a seamless process for you to kind of integrate that, if you have, or has there been any other big aha moments throughout your learning and development career that you can reflect back on?
Yeah. So I think I've always been one for the why. Like, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Why do we do the things we do? And I do believe the retail environment has always been very open to that. Although I think the last 2-3 years, and when we start looking at things like, what are the skills for the future? What is the future going to hold? What is the future going to bring? And I did some research around the key skills for 2025, the key skills for 2030. And then you start looking at things a little bit differently. Emotional intelligence is huge. Collaboration is huge. In the past, it was all about, well, what do I need to do in my role? And it was actually less about the people. So everybody used to talk about how important people are, but not everybody actually used to. It was, a lot of the times, it was lip service.
Wow.
And for me, the why is the people. Again, I'm trying to express it as well as I can. For me, why, the people are the why. Why do you do anything you do? It is actually people, and it's about the people. If you don't have people, there actually isn't a why. Because they're needed, they're required, and treat your people well. And that for me is probably, whilst I've always loved the people side, looking after your people is critical in your why. And it's the why isn't because you have to. The why is nearly that if you don't, again, you're dead in the water. Your business is not going to ultimately succeed. Your relationships aren't going to succeed. Your broader network is not going to succeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, that's a very big one.
No, the more you answer that question, the more I realize that I think to a lot of people that why element has always been inherent, but perhaps not so articulately brought across or codified as what I guess Simon Sinek did with the 3 circles and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's something which, if you are, I think you naturally are people centric, or there are a lot of people out there, especially in learning development, that are innately people centric and therefore buy into the why. But you touched on something there, which I think when you said it's all about people, which also in my opinion, when it comes to recruiting people into companies, and I'm talking about anyone down to the person who's, conveying the product to the potential customer, is that we often historically have recruited people based on either a CV or a skill set or some kind of work experience, and perhaps not so much on whether there'd be a culture fit. And I wanted to get your input on that, because you strike me as the kind of person who would, and I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but you strike me as the kind of person who would rather want to make sure that they're a culture fit rather than a skill set fit. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, complete disclosure, culture is huge for me. My dissertation was around corporate culture.
Okay.
I love culture. It excites me when I speak about culture, and not the culture of this is how we must do it, and this is the only way we do it. It's about, for me, culture is your DNA. It's how you speak. It's what you breathe. It's a sense that you have when you enter an organization. And I can be very happy to say that wherever I've worked, culture's been massive, and it's been a massive driver of all the CEOs, which has made my life a lot easier. There's absolutely a place for skill set. There's absolutely a place for the contents of your CV. Unfortunately, not everybody's brilliant with numbers, and they can't be an analyst. And not everybody's brilliant with people, and they might not be in the people game or in marketing. So there's definitely a place for skill. But yeah, I'm quite a gut feel person. And for me, the sense is, can this person fit into who we are, the greater we are? And there's no mold. And I think for a lot of people, when they start out in recruitment, they will, well, how do I recruit? And what are the boxes I have to look for? And the first few are tick boxes, yes, but the rest of it is about the interaction, how the person comes across, how they feel in their environment, and there's so much nonsense you can sprout in the interview. If you've been around long enough, you get a sense of it. And for me, the fit has to be. And please, Yara, I need to stress, I'm not talking about robots that everybody's the same.
Yes.
Definitely not, because the culture is made up of so many different people. But for me, one of the biggest things is, what is that person's passion? And if you can be passionate about something, and if it's aligned to who we are as a greater we, then definitely I'll take that over skills any day. But again, I know provided that there are some roles that require.
A quick break to check in with our sponsor for this interview, RCA Consulting. RCA have been doing work in the learning and development space for the last 12 years, working with a range of different types of companies and organizations to facilitate the enhancement of their organizational culture through blended learning and performance management. To get a free needs analysis for your organization, go over to rcaconsulting.biz to find out more. Without further ado, back to the episode.
Yeah, no, I completely hear where you're coming from there, but I certainly advocate a very similar notion that, culture, I think, what's the old saying, culture trumps strategy, or whatever the case is, but culture is an interesting one, because I also don't believe that everyone understands the true benefit of culture within an organization. I think if you're more of the ones in the noughts kind of person, you don't always understand the value. From someone who really does understand it, I want to ask you, what are some of the true benefits, the real benefits to a company that is able to integrate or manifest a culture almost throughout the value chain? I mean, what are those real benefits that come out of that? I think you've seen the kind of real life outcome of that. Could you give our listeners some kind of insight into what that actually does for a company in a positive sense?
Well, it makes your job, initially it might make your job a lot harder. So if you're starting out and you're still trying to grow your culture, it takes a while for people to understand what it's really about and what you're trying to achieve. And it might be the language that you use, or how you interact with people, or how you have a specific day, or what your vision is. But once you have a culture and you've built a strong foundation, it makes it a lot easier to speak to people about their role within the organization and how they have an important part to play in the organization. Because a strong culture, and here we're talking good cultures, because you can have a culture that's not a great culture. The great cultures and the good cultures are people understand their role, people understand that they're valued in the organization, and people understand why they're valued. Now, that why they're valued and understanding their role is not necessarily just a job description or getting feedback in a performance assessment. It's how we talk about our business, how people are on the journey with us. That you're not speaking one language to one set and another language to the other. So again, everybody understands. No one is left out in the cold. Everybody gets it. Everybody knows what we stand for as an organization. Everyone is invited to participate, and everyone is equal. And that makes for a great culture.
Yeah, I was going to ask you with that in mind. I mean, I think you alluded to it a bit earlier, but it's certainly not easy to get to a place where you've got, for the most part, the culture truly integrated throughout the workforce. What were some of the challenges, or what are some of the challenges that you find yourself continually facing to get to that point where, I guess, the vast majority of the people buy into that? I mean, I would have thought that from a leadership perspective, from a management perspective, the role of the manager and leader is critical in manifesting that culture. What do you?
That nearly. I shouldn't say it goes without saying, but for me, that's definite. I can't. And you can't act in one way and tell others to act in another. So you have to walk, talk, eat the culture. And there are days where it can be challenging, because sometimes you just want to go like, really, today I'd like to just maybe deal with something a little bit differently, but you've got to remain true to the culture. And I think that's also where the authentic leadership comes out, that sometimes you have to have some tough conversations, but you've got to keep to what the culture of your organization is. And it's completely a top-down approach. If it's not working right from the top, if it's not being bought into right from the top of your organization and being driven from there, then you're going to face a bit of an uphill battle. It's not HR's job. It's not, okay, so we want this culture, so HR, you're going to implement and roll it out. No, everyone has a role to play. And it also can't be a case of, that department, they're generally not great with people, or they don't like to implement new things. You can't do that, because if you allow for exceptions, again, it's going to be facing an uphill battle. Can't be exceptions. And again, sometimes there are going to be some eye rolls around the things you do from a culture perspective. And I'm speaking very generally here, again, just based on experience. There are some eye rolls. Somebody doesn't always want to sing a song, or somebody doesn't always want to give a high five, or whatever it might be. And here I'm speaking from experience that I speak to other HR colleagues as well. But just ultimately, it's for the greater good of your business. And people then they start feeling a real sense of belonging. And if they don't feel that sense of belonging, and you've had that discussion, well, I don't, maybe then it's not the right organization for the person. But I've only had positive experiences with the culture. If it's a true culture, and if everybody buys into it, again, and as I say, it becomes part of the DNA of your organization.
Yeah, it's funny how you mention those little points, because I think there are slight and small contradictions that happen in all of our lives, and I guess the authentic aspects of it must just outweigh those moments of, I guess, contradiction as much as possible. But I think one thing that you alluded to there, Alison, which I absolutely love, is that the notion of building a culture is that it is an infinite exercise. It's not a finite game, in the sense that, like you so well put, it can't be a project that's handed over to a department. It's essentially got to be fed, indefinitely. And I think I speak sort of out of turn perhaps, but I think a lot of companies make that mistake where they say they want to build a culture and then it becomes a project. And and perhaps that's
Oh
where.
no, there's nothing worse than that. Yeah, that's sometimes unfortunately where we fail. But again, we're not infallible. So
Yeah.
cultures also evolve as businesses evolve. And so again, the COVID crisis, look how so many businesses, restaurants that then shut down and now they work from kitchens, and you have Uber Eats and Mr. Delivery and all these things, and they would have to potentially have changed their culture.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they've still changed it completely, but you have to evolve as well.
Yes.
Things don't stay the same forever. So it's a constant evolvement. It's like you said, it's not a project where you go, okay, well, we've ticked all the boxes and now we can put it away. And maybe in a few years' time we'll revisit it. Again, it's just part of what I'll say it again, it's part of your DNA. You breathe it, you sleep it.
And with that, I guess it's so inherently linked to the people that comprise that company that, there's, I suppose that, and the reason why I'm saying that is I want to lead to my next question, which is you've had the benefit of kind of being exposed to two very successful company cultures in Cape Union and I guess Puma from a sort of a longer term perspective. And as much as you can give away, I'd love to know the comparatives or the contrasts, I guess, between those two, both being very successful, but perhaps both being quite different. Is that the case, or were there a lot of similarities?
There's actually a lot of the similarities, and to probably generalize more, again, it's from the top down. So when you have a CEO, an MD, a GM that is committed and passionate to the business and that drives it, that's how you create a successful culture. That it's part of what you do. So that for me is the biggest, that driving force of this is what we want our culture to be. We want it to be inclusive. Everybody can enjoy it. Everybody can be a part of it. And in Puma, it's, you will see on the websites and so on, we're big on being you. We accept any and everyone. There's no secret. I'm not telling you anything I can't say, that people are accepted for whoever they are. They must just have a love for the brand and for what we do and for what we stand for. And even likewise, even with Cape Union Mart, I mean, it's been years, but it was be passionate about what you're doing, love doing, and enjoy the journey. And again, not from the top down. That for me is the greatest success, driven from the top down and being inclusive as a leader as well, including everybody in the journey. So it's not about one person. You have the leader at the top, but everyone's included in that journey and everyone's invited to the table.
The word that I kind of thought of was that both companies have always struck me as being inclusively aspirational, and I think you kind of alluded to that already, is that it's you can be very aspirational but do it in an inclusive kind of way where you invite people along for the ride. And I think that's a very admirable, kind of very successful way these days to get the right talent on board with you. And I guess even be able to traverse the more challenging times, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, obviously we've faced a lot of adverse conditions over the last, call it 2 years now. And I guess culture plays a massive role in that as well, because it's, I guess, the way that you also deal with challenges that defines your culture. I'd love to know in your guys' space and in your particular responsibility, what has it been like the last 2 years, and how have you gone about providing the support and the necessary sort of help to your people to be able to kind of get through this and make headway?
Again, so COVID, it's not unique to our business. It's not unique to South Africa, but it's the world over. And we've been back in the workplace since last year. We came back. Of course, with all the necessary protocols and with people working some days on, some days off. And in the previous organization I was working in, it was the same. You do, people in through feedback from people, whilst people were quite worried about COVID, they were also missing the camaraderie with so in our environment, it was making sure that we were able to immediately work from home. We had the necessary technology to work from home, and just staying in touch with people, continue to have the kinds of meetings one would have. That's what's worked really well. We also have great wellness. We have got great wellness opportunities for people. We have people that are able to call in if they need necessary help from external sources. So that has worked well for us. But I'm happy to say people are really happy to be back in the office and trying to get back to a little bit of the normal. Just again, more generally speaking, people I've spoken to, and it's great when you've got a network of HR people, or just generally people that you chat with in various corporates and smaller organizations, that people actually need people. Even the introverts who would again roll their eyes when they need to work in an open plan office, or when somebody's speaking to them too often, that they've missed having people around them. And we do need people. So for a lot, the daily commute, they don't have that anymore. That's been great. But more and more people I speak to are like, I really want to spend more time in the office. And again, this is not necessarily where we are per se at Puma, but just generally, I'd love to see my colleagues a little bit more, or I'd love to just interact with people. And it's need to be really conscious and mindful of, because I think there are a lot of repercussions that COVID has had that we potentially haven't even seen yet. By people maybe not being able to see others, and even if it's just a smile across the room, and a nod of acknowledgement. You don't get that across Teams or Zoom, or you don't get that virtually like you do in person.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting how one only realizes how much you miss it when it's not there, which is the old cliche. But I think it certainly has become a reality in people's minds, I suppose, and in their hearts as well, of what's important to them. I think you might have answered this question already in your previous answer, but what do you think is the best thing that will come out of COVID for, in your environment? The thing that changed, I guess, that will remain that way, because we never thought about it doing it that way before, but because we've done it and because we've realized it's such a good thing or such a valuable addition, we're going to kind of keep it going forward. Is there one thing for you that kind of sticks out?
Wow. I think technology and our ability to use technology to our advantage, and if I can elaborate on that, but people are starting to learn a little bit more about what technology can do. So what Teams can do, or there's whiteboard, or there's being able to split into separate meeting rooms and things that you would never consider in the past. And again, just conferences and webinars and things that one attends, that again, they would have cancelled in the past if it was bad weather or people couldn't get into it. I remember back, 3 years ago, that Cape Town had this terrible weather warning, and I was attending a conference at the CTICC, and half the people didn't arrive because of this terrible weather warning, and it really wasn't that bad at all. But imagine if it's now, everybody just would have done it online. So I think the greater use of technology to our advantage, to see it as an advantage, and not a disadvantage. I mean, sometimes, again, as I mentioned, it would be great to see people physically, but to use it to our advantage. That's been one of the biggest common work.
Yeah, it's funny how, again, I think it goes back to balance, doesn't it? Where, technology has been amazing in terms of being able to solve the problem intermittently. But like you said earlier, we've also been craving the ability to go back and physically see people, etc. And I guess it's just a matter of finding the balance between the two, where you kind of get the best of both worlds to the greatest extent. But I suppose trial and error will hopefully get us there sooner than later. I wanted to ask last two questions before I let you go. this whole debate around the remote versus office or in-office dynamic, we're always trying to find and understand what different companies are doing in that respect. Have you guys kind of doubled down on something going forward where you're quite happy with that approach, or is it very much still up in the air as to what's going to be the best way to kind of move forward?
So we're quite clear to that we pretty much are in the office.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a policy where you can have a work from home day, but we are largely in the office. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on, and as much as I've said again that technology is great, we have stores, our retail staff are in stores, we have a big warehouse, our warehouse staff in stores. So it's as important for our head office and our regional office staff to be in office.
I would have thought that speaks very much into your culture, and I suppose gives an interlude into what is really important in your environment. So it's, I think, staying true to who you guys are very much so. I wanted to end off, Alison, if I may, with a question which we like to try and ask at the end of most of the podcast. But if you could give me 3 words which I guess would define your impact on the working world when all is said and done and you hang up your hat for the last time. What would those 3 words ideally be for you?
Only 3 words, Rob. You can't do that. You can't do that to me.
Less is more.
Yeah, well, it's just come back to bite me because I often say that to others. But again, this might sound cliched, and it's 4 words, so sorry, but
all good.
To have, or 5 words actually, to have made a difference. And I'd like to elaborate on that. To have made a difference in whatever way it might be. We underestimate how much of a difference we can make in people's lives. So it could be the smallest thing, and I've had people come back to me about something that I'd forgotten I'd potentially said to them, and they said, like, do you know how much of a difference they've made in my life? And I'm going, I sometimes feel guilty because I want to remember that I'd said that, but yeah, to make a difference, that people need to understand that they are unique, and that they really can make a difference. And if anything, if I'm able to help people to think differently, to look at things a little bit differently, and to realize their potential, then I've made a difference. Again, do I get it wrong sometimes? Absolutely. But I'd like to think I can get it right more than I get it wrong. So yeah, make a difference. There we go. There's 3 words. Make a difference.
I think we can definitely accept that answer. I always enjoy chatting to you because I think beyond just your wonderful insights, I think your overriding or overarching intention is always one which is always felt very, very genuinely and authentically. And I think that's also a big part of your success in your career is, I think we have a natural intention that we pass along in the way we communicate or how we react or whatever the case might be. And I always think that, from your perspective or looking at you as an individual, I think you've always been very authentic in the way that you've dealt with not just the easy stuff, but the more challenging stuff as well. And I think with that in mind, that end goal of leaving a positive impact on the world or making a difference is certainly one very much in your grasp. So yeah, I just want to say thank you as well for your time. It's greatly appreciated. And like I said, I wanted to interview you for a long time. And I'm sure the episode will be very well received by, I think, the rest of the community, which are really so passionate about moving people in the right direction.